Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Robin Atkins is back, along with John Euler, to discuss, well, lots of different topics. Robin is taking us through her experiences of life, from being a teen to all the troubles that she went through, working with Planned Parenthood, which is another one of those deviant organizations that might have helped her a little bit. In this day and age, things have changed dramatically. And with that, let's bring in John Euler. John, you're an expert on all of this. And, Robin's story, as we've said in the past, is very compelling. There's a lot to this story. She has gone to the deepest depths and bounced back. And her climbing out of that hole is something that I know that I'm proud of her, and I'm sure you are as well. And I know that Robin's strength is something that is second to none. As you said, we've had a lot of heroes on our show, and I think Robin is not only a hero, but also a warrior just for fighting to come back from everything that she's been through.
And now she is fighting on behalf of kids. And I recommend people go back and watch the prior episodes. That will give them the context to see why we have Robin Atkins back with us. Robin, thank you so much. As you have been sharing your story, there's so many parts to it that are really compressed that young people certainly are going to be able to relate to. Unfortunately, you experienced so much of that. Where we left off, you had transitioned, but in life stage, you had moved from a very detrimental situation to help with your sister-in-law, and you said that changed your life. And why that is very compelling for me is you are, as you sit in your office, you're a therapist. So you have come from being a teen rape survivor, having been traumatized by a pastor that supposedly should have been compassionate, and you saw that he reamed out another teen and kicked her out of the church, that a teen that had become pregnant. You were sitting waiting to talk to him, and you said to yourself, who needs this? And you walked away. You walked away from your church, understandably, and then in essence from your faith. You said you went into a very dark place. Your parents, your dad specifically, because of his own feelings, was not supportive. And before you knew it, you had found yourself susceptible to somebody that was not going to be a good fit for you, that was going to be harmful. You married him. That was an abusive relationship. You divorced and you ended up homeless. And there's just so much to it. And then it went from bad to worse. And you said that God intervened. And that's very much a part of who we are. We don't necessarily get into doctrine on our program, but to know that we need a power higher than us and a very personal one, and God met you in a very personal way. And we left off last time, you said you had moved to help a family member, and that was a turning point. You had also gone to college. In the midst of all that, you got a degree, which was phenomenal to me, to think that here this young gal that is being traumatized every which way and still has the fortitude to be able to get your degree. That's unbelievable. So pick up at that point. Bring us up to where you are now.
Yeah, so this is 2005. I moved to where I live now in Indiana, and I had a bachelor's in philosophy and a bachelor's in psychology, and I was newly sober. And at that point in time in the field of mental health, you didn't have to have a license to work with people with addictions. And so I had never been addicted to opiates or painkillers or any kind of pill. So I began working as an addictions counselor with those recovering from opiate addiction. And that experience was really good for me. It helped me, number one, understand the business side and technical side of the work we do, because we're not taught that in college. And then it afforded me the opportunity to pursue my master's degree as well. So I got married to the man I'm married to now. We've been married 17 years.
But I should mention, you did clarify, you did mention that as well. And what a powerful thing, as people go back and listen to part one, that you mentioned there's so much of your past that has manifested itself, which it will, right? We are a product of our past. We don't have to stay there. But as you said, that so much of the past trauma then impacted your current relationship, and that you and your husband worked through that. And one of the things that you are most proud of in a very healthy way is that you've been able to protect your daughters from going through what you've gone through.
Yeah, so we have 4 living children, and we had a miscarriage. So we have 5 children together total. And I got my master's degree while I was having our first 2 children. And then I got my license while I was having the other 3 children. And then I opened up my private practice and started working in reproductive mental health. And I didn't ever think I would get involved in anything like politics related to abortion or reproduction or gender dysphoria or any of that. My dad was a politician. He ran for Congress when I was a kid, and I saw the underbelly of that world and wanted nothing to do with it. People that don't know the backside of politics don't know just how ugly that world can be, and I didn't want any part of it. But I just kept getting asked by so many different people, can you come talk to us about your abortion experience, or can you come talk to us about your loss experience, or what? And so I said, I guess I better just enter into it. I keep getting asked to do it. I better enter into it. So in 2019, I joined the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs as a board member, and I opened up their mental health subsection. And our goal in that subsection is to help anyone who's hurting from any kind of reproductive loss, in particular an abortion, find recovery, and to talk about what informed consent actually means with regard to abortion. And it's interesting, I've been warning people for years that while some people do say they have informed consent from Planned Parenthood, and I'm glad if they do. I don't want to speak for them. They can tell their own stories, and I don't want to doubt them. So if they have, great. But there's thousands of women who did not get informed consent from Planned Parenthood. And now Planned Parenthood is offering gender transition, hormone replacement therapy, or writing referrals for surgeries without informed consent. It depends on what state you're in, state by state, on what age. I know in my state, as young as 18, sometimes 17, they will, upon first meeting, refer for hormone replacement therapy with no therapist, no intake, no exploration about why. So we have vulnerable 17, 18-year-old kids who have been through some kind of trauma, who may be autistic, and they're in vulnerable positions, and they're looking for help. And here's Planned Parenthood that's been pretending since 1928 that they're helping women, pretending they're helping kids. And the same thing that happened to women. Women go in, get an abortion, they leave, and they're in the same exact position they were before. Planned Parenthood isn't there helping them with their trauma. They've just removed their child. With people with gender dysphoria, they just help them transition, and then they're left to deal with the fallout of that on their own. Planned Parenthood isn't there to help them with that trauma. So they're a part of the financial predator machine that's taking advantage of all of these people in difficult circumstances.
What just came to mind, Robin, and again, the more you tell your story, there's so much. One of the criticisms, and part of it is unfortunately well-earned, well-deserved, is, and again, we're not necessarily going to get into the pro-life end of things, because that's, a little bit off our focus, but oftentimes you will hear a criticism of the church, and I use that term loosely, that when it comes to pro-life, that, oh yeah, you want the young lady to keep the baby, but you're not there to help her after. I hadn't thought about as deeply as when you just said that. So the shoe is on the other foot. That what you're saying is Planned Parenthood is there to do what they do, but then out the door goes the young lady. And are you telling us that that's basically it? Once
yeah, that's it.
Wow.
And it's interesting because they always say it's between her and her doctor. She's never met this doctor before. This isn't her primary physician. She's not even getting informed consent from the physician. When you go in, it's somebody on the front end of things at a desk, an administrative assistant or something, doing the informed consent. She's not even discussing that with her doctor. So this isn't her doctor. This is just a doctor that performs this procedure, and she never sees them again. In fact, this is one of the reasons we don't know how many people are harmed from abortion, is because those doctors don't handle the harm. These women end up in the ER or with whoever their primary physician is to manage any negative outcomes in any way they're wounded physically from the abortion. And it's the same with anyone who's transitioning. It's not Planned Parenthood that's managing the medical care of that or the emotional outcome of that. They're just selling a product.
And that's crucial for people to really let that sink in, that if we care about people in vulnerable positions and situations in their situation in life, then we're going to think holistically. We're going to think about what truly will help them. And, I can claim to be compassionate. The question is, what kind of compassion, what kind of care and concern? And I'm thinking about how many young people in the trans movement, because really the trans movement, as you and I both know, Robin, as therapists and just as people, but as therapists, that wounded young people are the ones that are attracted to the trans movement. And that's what's so insidious, because predators, financial and sexual predators, know. So it is such a haven for those that are going to take advantage of and exploit a vulnerable young person. They're going to manipulate them in the direction that the predator, call them perpetrators, a financial perpetrator. If I'm taking advantage of you financially, even though I'm smiling at you, if I have a used car lot and I'm unscrupulous, as you walk on my lot, I'm smiling, but you're a dollar sign to me. Mm-hmm. I'll be nice to you. I'll even say, hey, could you fill out a survey, right? But meanwhile, I've taken you to the cleaners. The smarter I am, I'm going to try to ensure you have a positive customer experience and you're a customer for life. But meanwhile, I could care less whether or not you could afford it. I don't care anything about you and what parallels there are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these people in vulnerable positions, unfortunately, are often taken advantage of in that itself. So if you haven't been through therapy and found a place of healing and recovery, you're at exponentially higher risk, because you're like we talked about in the first couple episodes, I was mentally attuned to be attracted to abusers. I hadn't yet worked through that to understand why and what I needed to change about my boundaries and how I see safe people or unsafe people. And I've been through that now. And now I trust my sympathetic nervous system when it flares up a red flag about something or someone. But survivors, whether they've been through healing or not, are often told, oh no, that's just your trauma response. That's not really happening. Or no, those people aren't really dangerous. You're just ill. You're just mentally ill. It's not. And having interactions with some people online, in social media, I've had people like Dr. Cantor talk to survivors in terrible ways, dismissing them. I'm the expert. What do you know? You're just a trauma survivor. You're just talking out of your trauma. You don't know anything. Excuse me, doctor, that person actually went through the thing you're intellectualizing. I think they probably know it more intimately than you do. And you're not willing to listen to them.
As a matter of fact, Robin, the doctor you just referenced, and we'll have a standing invitation for Dr. James Cantor if he wants to come on our program. Dr. James Cantor is, in my estimation, the number one pusher for the destigmatization, the normalization, and eventually the legalization, though he might take issue with that, the legalization of pedophilia. Now, he might say, no, we don't legalize pedophilia. Oh, okay, but if you backdoor it by allowing lowering of age of consent, what happened in California, so we would give Dr. Cantor a standing invitation to come on and talk to us. One thing that is true is Dr. Cantor, in his studies of pedophilia, who tries to make the case that pedophilia is really a genetic condition, as far as a man was born with a brain who's attracted to minors, so minor attracted persons. That is a lie. Now, he will say the science is settled. No. What Dr. Cantor has is a single static brain scan. Everything else is conjecture. And it's very interesting that what he has found in his scans mirrors very closely the impact of men who saturate their minds in pornography. And Dr. Cantor downplays the dangers of pornography. He also promotes sex bots as something that is reasonable, yet he's never worked in a proper way with sexual predators on an outpatient basis is not how you work properly. How do I know? Because I do sex offender treatment. And he also minimizes the effects of pornography on young people, and he has advocated for not disclosing, so a mandated report for men that are accessing child pornography. So there are a lot of issues. And as you say, I have seen it and I have heard it as far as watching the dialogue, Robin, how he treats survivors. So it's very interesting that a man that is into pornography, I took screenshots of what was on his Facebook page. It's deeply deviant. And so I've seen him debate with and poo-poo and minimize actual survivors, as well as Michael Bailey, a good friend of his. Michael Bailey was a sexologist that had a demonstration in his after class at Northwestern University. So this was voluntary, but all the class, stayed afterward. And there was going to be a demonstration of a power tool with a dildo, and it was a hacksaw. And this man inserts it into a nude woman right there. So there's Dr. Bailey and Cantor. They all know these sexologists are very problematic. So to think that these sexologists that advocate very deviant stuff in pornography, that they are mean to survivors, it's surreal.
Well, and it's all tied together. And I don't want to get your program off topic or too far off task, but all of it goes back to Alfred Kinsey and John Money. All of it does, whether it's the sexual deviancy or pedophilia or pornography or transgenderism. All of it goes back to those two men. And it was interesting. The majority of sexologists throughout the world believed that pedophilia was a paraphilia up until 2012. And then suddenly, all of them switched gears in 2012. I have yet to dig up what the thing was that happened in 2012 to cause them all to do that. I'm sure it's some higher up thing that I don't have access to. But I just noticed, suddenly a majority of them switched to, no, it's innate. People can't help it. Well, even if that were true, and I agree with you, Cantor's research, there's so many confounding variables that could be at play that haven't been looked into, that he hasn't proven anything. But even if he were right, if someone has obsessive thoughts about something that's going to harm themselves or someone else, if we're treating OCD or any kind of dysphoria, the last thing you do is hand them access to the thing they're obsessing about. And as you said, he wants predators to have access to graphic novels of child pornography and child sex dolls. That's not going to help them with their attraction to children. That's going to encourage their attraction to children, and it's going to normalize it. And while he might want to say he's not trying to legalize that, if you deem pedophilia a legal orientation in the United States, it is legalized. You just have to identify it as an orientation legally, and then it's legalized because of one of our court cases at the Supreme Court. So it's all tied together. It all goes back to John Money. I mean, it goes back before that to a gentleman in Germany, but in the United States, it goes back to Kinsey and Money.
Robin, let's go back to, because we'll save that for another program, because people need to see that, again, connecting the dots in the trans movement. Well, this actually is one of the concerns, that there are people behind the scenes that are really trying to push the legalization of pedophilia, and this is the ultimate Trojan horse. So they're pushing the boundaries, and the idea of bodily autonomy, that's a beautiful way of saying that The child can make his or her own decisions when it comes to their body. In COVID, they pushed that, and before you know it, they floated into the psyche that, oh, yeah, these young people at age 12, they're able to make these decisions, but behind the scenes, there's financial and sexual predators that are waiting in the wings for that. So continue to talk about, though, as you have continued on your journey of healing, you've experienced so much: an abortion, a miscarriage. I've made the case that miscarriages are one of the least understood things in our culture, especially in churches, because it's this middle ground that nobody's able or willing to help the survivors of miscarriages. And I'm very much aware, let's say, if anybody has a church-related background, it's probably very common for them to go to church or go to a faith-based community on Mother's Day. And Mother's Day, in my estimation, is one of the most conflicting days for women because it compresses and comprises all of those experiences, yet it only focuses on one thing. Plus, in my other program, I talk about emotional pigs. So you can have a male or female pig, meaning somebody that's extremely selfish, that doesn't deserve recognition, quite frankly, is traumatizing a family. To have a day where people come together, and we do want to acknowledge and honor mothers that are worthy of honor, but sitting in that congregation or that audience are so many women who have experienced so many things that it's such a conflicting day. You've no doubt experienced that. Well, you've experienced all these different things, but the topic of miscarriage is so difficult as well because it's one of the more difficult things to process as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, the majority of the work I do now professionally is around reproductive events, so loss or infertility, and it does cross over into transgenderism when I have patients who have gone through any kind of transition and are now sterile and therefore infertile, or if they are pregnant and experiencing gender dysphoria and how they respond to that. So they do collide in that way too. But yes, miscarriage is not acknowledged, and I think it's partly because our society always has this dual cognitive dissonance going on of like when we have an abortion, it's not a baby, but when you have a miscarriage, maybe it is, and it just depends on how the woman thinks or feels about it. Well, when you deny biological reality, like the trans movement is doing with women's biology, women can only be pregnant with a human being. There's nothing else a woman can be pregnant with. So when a miscarriage happens, she loses her child, her offspring. And so if society is going to refuse to acknowledge that in the name of bodily autonomy, then we're going to continue down this path of harming people that are experiencing these traumatic experiences.
Robin, talk to the parents. So we've got tech issues going on. Talk to the parents and then talk to the young people. You're a therapist, but you're also a survivor. And in the true sense of the word, that you were raped. But then you've been a domestic violence survivor. You have homeless. You've been through so much. Speak to the parents and then speak to the young people that are listening to us.
So to the parents, I would say, whatever emotions you're having, be it fear or anger or frustration or concern about any of what the world's throwing at us right now, those are normal emotions. And one thing that keeps me stable as a parent is remembering my children don't have to deal with all of that till they're adults. Until then, I am their shield. I am what protects them from all of those who would try to harm them. And so as parents, we can ground ourselves in I am the shield and reach our children with empathy and compassion. And when our children come to us with difficult things, appreciating that they're taking the risk to open up to us with those things. And no, we aren't enemies with our children ever. We are on a team together trying to solve a difficult problem. And as a parent, the first thing to do is remove whatever the stimulus is that's creating the problem. So if you have a child that's involved with gender dysphoria, they need to be removed from the people that are promoting that and affirming that for them. If you have a child that's telling you you're sexual active, you have to remove their ability to be alone with whoever they're sexually active with. That doesn't necessarily mean you cut off that relationship completely. That can cause them to go running and hide or run away or any number of things. But they no longer can be alone with that person. That trust is broken. So we have to remove the opportunity for them to continue to be harmed as parents, and work with them to help them back to a place of wholeness and healing. And to the children, I would say, assuming your parents are not neglectful or abusive, it is vital that you trust their judgment of the world and you seek their guidance and their help with whatever you're dealing with. While other adults might make you feel good because they affirm you and tell you how wonderful you are, they aren't the person that's there 24/7 who's been caring for you since you were an infant, that wants to protect you. They are there for their own ulterior motives. And so you may not like everything your parents say to you, but their motivation is to protect you, not to harm you.
Robin, there's so much that we need to talk about. Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to come back and unpack so many of these different issues in depth?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to share. And as you were going back and chronicling your experience, you were tapping into some emotion, and understandably, it takes a long time, right, to heal from deep wounds. It's part of the post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a more profound kind of thing. But deep wounds, we like to believe that time heals all wounds, but not without time, not without attention. So we can put a Band-Aid on them. But when we start to talk about them, that's really part of that healing. Mm-hmm. You kind of tap into a little bit more emotion. So thank you for your story and your willingness and your vulnerability and your professionalism.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Robin.
Brad,
John, I think this is a good place that you and I should just kind of break down what we've just experienced. John,
go, and again, we're so appreciative of Robin.
Absolutely. Robin's experience has led her to question a lot of things along the way, from her own self to her relationships, to relationship with God, to a relationship with her kids, her husbands along the way. Their internal conflict can go pretty deep, and Robin is really a true warrior to come and bounce back from everything that she's been through to get to the place that she is today. School's not a safe place. There's just been so much that we've unpacked in these first, 4 episodes with Robin alone, that the help is there. And that's what we want parents and grandparents to know, that we're here, and not because we're against the LGBTQ plus blah blah blah, but because we know that there are parents and grandparents who are struggling. And if you think you're struggling as a parent or a grandparent, you should see what your kids are going through every single day you send them to school. And that turmoil for those kids is a hell of a lot more dramatic than anything us parents or grandparents are going through. And you need to get your kids away from the schools. And while I'm not an advocate for pulling your kid out of school ever, we're in dire straight times right now, and this needs to be dealt with. And the only way to make a point is to get your kids away from these people who figure that they can indoctrinate and continue to own our children. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode. John, I think that's a good place to do that. I want to thank you and Robin for being here today. There is so much more to unpack on Unmasking the Trans Movement. I'm overwhelmed most days because of all the topics that come along with this. You're at home, you're overwhelmed as well, and we feel that for you. And we're here for you, and we're going to help you break this down so that you can communicate, so that you can stand strong, and so that you can bring hope not only for yourself, but also for your own children. With that, I'm Brad Wilder. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Remember, it's not our kids' fight. This is our fight. So get in the program. Get in the game. Let's go, people. It's time to stand up. We'll see you next time.